So there have been some massive updates in the BeaPlays situation where BeaPlays actually released a statement that was then ripped to shreds by her alleged victim. So today we're going to be going over it. Now I have recorded this video several times just because it has been so long every single time, so I'm going to do my best to make this as short and concise as possible. And these screenshots of all the statements will be on your screen, so you can pause the video to read them. But I would assume they'll be on the screen long enough for you to actually read the full thing without pausing. But regardless, this video is very sensitive in nature, and just legally, I have to disclose that everything in this video is alleged. Obviously, if it hasn't been proven in a court of law, if I say it's fact and it's not, I can get in trouble, so that's just why I'm using the word alleged. It does not mean that I do not believe the victim, Logan. Okay, so I'm sure everybody knows about this, but as of October 24th, 2025, Dressed Empress got in some drama because the Lady Gaga event did not go very well, and BeaPlays had a poor response to that. She didn't take the criticism very well. She was then demoted from community manager, and allegations surrounding previous actions that BeaPlays apparently committed against a minor at the time when she was an adult came to light, and BeaPlays privated all of her social medias, and only recently, as of September 17th, put out a statement, which the following day, her alleged victim, Logan, put out a statement basically contradicting everything she said. So we're gonna go over that in this video, and just get straight into it. A quick trigger warning, because this stuff is very sensitive in nature. Now, going over to BeaPlays' statement over here, she posted this to her Twitter, which is interesting to me because her Twitter is one of her platforms with the least amount of followers, and you'd think if you wanted to clear the air, you'd post it to all of your platforms, not just one of your smallest ones. So I do think it's already kind of like a bad faith thing to not be transparent on all of your platforms. Like, why was this not on your YouTube? This definitely should have been posted there. I don't know, maybe because she thinks she's a younger demographic on YouTube, but you could have maybe edited a bit or censored words to make it so it was fine with YouTube, but definitely bizarre to only post this on one platform and then to turn the comments off. But regardless, on the first page of a 2-page statement, she basically says that this is long overdue, and that she's sorry that she's hurt people and she's not looking to dodge accountability. First paragraph seems like we're on the right track. Then you get to the second paragraph, where she claims she was 19 years old, which Logan actually disputes. And she said, basically starts going on the sob story of how she was at the lowest point of her life, and she was depressed, and she had body dysmorphia and depression and anxiety, and she was so lonely, and she just wanted a friend. So that's why she apparently started talking to kids. I'm not trying to be mean, but there are lots of people who struggle with depression, anxiety, body dysmorphia, dysphoria, right? And they don't talk to kids. I'm not quite sure why she's trying to use her mental health as a sort of crutch here when she just said she's not trying to dodge accountability, but is then justifying almost why she did what she did. I hate to break it to you, but if you're going through this kind of stuff, it sounds like you need a therapist, not a child to talk to, right? And I get, like, sometimes people be friends with people who are maybe children when there isn't that much of an age gap, but it's like, there are surely people your age that you could have been friends with. You didn't have to choose a 16-year-old. It just doesn't really make sense to me, but anyways, she goes on to say that she was actually introduced by a mutual friend who was like, yeah, you should talk to this person. You guys have a lot in common. And she was like, I guess. And then they started talking, and things quickly became very inappropriate, as per her words. And then she basically says that, this person, who we later find out is Logan, allegedly, was apparently being abused at home, which is, I don't know, it just seems weird. Like, you're using your mental health as a crutch, and then you're saying, guys, Logan was going through a lot, and trying to paint yourself as almost this savior? I don't know, but she basically says, because there's speculations going around that she was paying Logan for explicit materials, and she says in this statement that she actually bought him a new laptop and was giving him money so that he could start YouTube and basically leave his abusive house. Which, if anybody reading this didn't read Logan's part, they think, hey, that's a pretty nice thing to do, nice job. Then she goes on to say that when they were both adults, they thought maybe they would live together so Logan could, get away from his family, apparently, and she developed separation anxiety from him. It was very controlling. And that there's, I guess, when Logan was underage, there was an investigation performed by the school that BeaPlays worked at because somebody was concerned about Logan having this inappropriate contact with BeaPlays, and the school said that nothing was illegal, but it was bad and she shouldn't have done it. Which I'm thinking in my head, just because something isn't illegal doesn't mean it's not wrong. It's not illegal for me to go and look at a toddler and go, you suck, loser, right? But I wouldn't do that because it's morally and ethically incorrect. Like, it's just not a nice thing to do. And I hate it when people say, oh, well, it's not illegal, so it's fine. No, babe. No, it's not fine. There's lots of legal loopholes and stuff like that. And it certainly doesn't mean that what you did was justifiable just because it wasn't illegal. I think that's a weird thing to mention and a weird thing to try to use to almost defend yourself. Like, regardless, you were talking to a minor when you're an adult and you're confirming that. That is a big no-no. That is not good, right? Anyways, then she basically says that she was being controlling over Logan. They had inappropriate conversations. And then she was like, oh, Logan, I'm sorry. And Logan was like, yeah, it's okay. We can be friends. And then I guess they played games together and just naturally drifted apart after a while. So in her statement, she's saying, yeah, all the loose ends are tied. Everything's good. We're friends. Or we were friends and now we just grew apart. That's all that happened, guys. Don't even worry about it. Then she goes on to say that it's been 6 years since this happened. And she's, she plays it back every day in her head, which seems like trying to play victim again to me, but she says like she can't rewind the time and she's sorry and blah blah blah. And then on this next page she talks about how she's been going to therapy and she's been volunteering and helping other people and charities and stuff like that, which I don't know what you want, like a gold star, like congratulations, ding, like you went to therapy, nice. Like, and I'm not trying to be nasty and mean, but it's like this whole statement very much to me seems like an effort to downplay the severity of what happened. And it is life-altering for a child when they are groomed, which is what Logan is alleging in this situation. And what a lot of the stuff that is mentioned very much, hints towards. And it's just very bizarre that she's trying to almost paint it like this situation was already resolved and we should just like move past it. Because she said her and Logan are good and she went to therapy, so she's a better person, guys. It's okay. Forget about it. Don't worry about it. Which it just seems very dismissive to me. Then she goes on to say that she's not an awful person, even though she apparently was talking to a kid. And then she says she's sorry for people who were impacted by her behavior. And then more ranting. This is very, very much a rambly statement. And then at the end, she's like, yeah, but Dressed and Pressed needs to be held accountable too. Which I'm like, okay. I made a video talking about how BeaPlays is being used as a scapegoat for the Dressed and Pressed situation because I do believe that. But regardless, this statement, is it not about how you were allegedly grooming a child, but now you're making it about Dress to Impress? Like, sure, maybe you want to call them out for their deplorable behavior, but I feel like the statement isn't the place to do that. Like, it's kind of like, you're almost, to me, like the way I understand it is, hey guys, I made a mistake. Sorry, it was an oopsies, but like, I'm better now. But like, Dressed and Pressed is just as bad, guys. They did some bad things. It's like, okay, like, there can be multiple bad people in one situation, but that doesn't then forego all the stuff that you've done. Like, it's not like an excuse, or you can't just now shift the focus back to Dressed and Pressed. It's bizarre to me that she mentioned this in her statement. I think that could have been maybe mentioned in a separate statement. But regardless, at the end, she finishes it by saying that she's sorry and, she's working on being better. Okay. And obviously people didn't really like the statement because it was a lot of, woe is me, I'm a victim, this is why I did it. Then, this account on Twitter that claims to be Logan, a BeaPlays alleged victim, posted a reply to her statement, which was brutal, to say the least, right? And I can't confirm or deny if this is Logan's Twitter. It has 20,000 views on this post alone, so I would assume this is probably a reputable page, but you never know. So anyways, in Logan's statement, he starts off by saying, I honestly only believe you are apologizing because you effed up and got caught. We were simply trying to soften the blow of things. You are making it sound like you were 19 when we met. We were 20, you were 20, and I was 16. Now, downplaying your age in a situation like this is actually very characteristic of people who are trying to take advantage of kids. Because when you say 16, 19, it doesn't sound that bad. But when you hear 16, 20, it all of a sudden sounds like much more of an age gap, right? And, can I confirm or deny how old she was? No. But I think it's interesting that if this is true, why did she choose to downgrade her age? It's like, you've already been accused of doing something pretty serious and pretty terrible. And now you're saying like, oh no guys, like, I was 19, not actually 20, and he's saying you're 20. So how old were you? Like, it's a 1 year difference, but it's just weird to lie about something so small if that is the case. Then he goes on to say, at the start of our friend group, the youngest person was 14. Most of us were 16 to 20s. This is also interesting because in BeaPlays' statement, she claims that the people in their friend group were 16, 17 to 20-ish. And this person, Logan, is claiming that the youngest was 14, which is interesting because in the UK, the age of consent is 16. So anybody below the age of consent, i.e. 14 years old, can't consent to stuff. So I think it was a strategic move on her part to maybe not disclose that there were younger people in the group chat because that would make it look even worse. It's just weird. Like, why are we fibbing about things? Like, it doesn't make sense. Then Logan actually highlights a part of BeaPlays' statement and says that their friend, this mutual friend that allegedly introduced them to them like each other, they weren't even friends at the time, and that Logan knew BeaPlays from their content and in their Discord server, and that they were making, like, she helped him make content and they didn't actually have a mutual friend, which is really just highlighting this power imbalance, which I think is very concerning. And like, why are you lying about this stuff if this is true? Like, I don't understand. Like, you've been accused of doing something deplorable, right? Why not just own it? You take a month off to make a statement and you apparently your statement's filled with all these lies? For what reason, right? Like, this is just very bizarre. Then Logan highlights another part where she talks about how the friend group was very toxic, and he says, our group was definitely toxic at times, but most of the time it was because you would start fights over me anytime I gave my attention to someone who wasn't you. Which, again, this is very characteristic of people who are trying to take advantage of kids, because they will become very possessive over the children that they are trying to target. And we'll get into the next part here, actually, which is part of what I'm going to say. Logan goes on to say, how can you justify why you were helping me? I lived in a bad environment, yes. I was unhappy sometimes, but I had normal teenage arguments with my family that you would blow out of proportion to give me a reason to come live with you. This is the second part of what I was going to discuss. At the same time of trying to become very possessive over kids, these people will often try to take away these kids' support systems. That means isolating them from friends and family, making them almost seem like they're in some sort of a environment where everybody except for the predator is against them. And it creates a sense that the child cannot reach out for help, the child can't tell anybody what's happening, because according to this person, everybody's against them. And something they'll often do is dramatize or try to almost skew situations to manipulate the child into thinking that people hate them or that their family doesn't love them or stuff like that, to make the child become more dependent on the person who's trying to take advantage of them. Which is, in my opinion, based on what Logan's saying, what is happening here. Then Logan goes on to say, should we talk about all the personal stuff that happened in your home? You have absolutely no right to bring up my situation. You are over-exaggerating my situation just to benefit you. That's something I also mentioned. I didn't know if BeaPlays had his consent to post about his allegedly abusive home. Apparently not. It's weird in your statement where you're trying to take accountability for the stuff you did to then mention somebody's trauma. I feel like that's kind of weird, but... then he goes on to say, you sent me an old microphone you had after already telling another friend you're going to send it to them. All that support to my $2,000 laptop was because you bought actual content off of me. What's interesting is that BeaPlays likes to emphasize in her statement that although it wasn't illegal, you know, it was bad, like I shouldn't have done it. But I'm not sure if she's aware that if this is true, right, it doesn't matter Romeo and Juliet laws or, you know, the age gap laws and stuff like that and all the logistics of that. Even if you're 16, age of consent, if you are below the age of 18 and you are sending explicit images to people, regardless if it's for money or not, that is CSAM and that is not allowed. That is illegal. That is a crime. I do know that in some places it is also a crime even when you're adult to exchange images for money. I think that depends. That's like certain countries, obviously not the US, because there's stuff like OF that we know of, right? But it's definitely concerning to me that this person who was a minor was allegedly being paid for pictures and, you know, almost kind of using their bad home situation as a, you know, justification to do it, and BeaPlays trying to paint themselves as some savior that was just trying to rescue Logan, but Logan's saying no, she was taking advantage of me, which is very concerning. Then Logan goes on to say, within months of us knowing each other, the plans were already being talked about for me to stay over there with you. You're making it sound like these plans are made when we were adults. And that's definitely the impression that I got. It definitely sounded like they were adults making these plans. He's saying, no, I was a kid. Which again is, in my opinion, an effort to isolate somebody, especially if you're encouraging them to move away from their friends and family and to live with you. Then at that point, they're around you all the time. They don't have any support systems around them anymore, and they're basically trapped, right? Logan goes on to say, you were dramatic about everything and that's why your mom was worried. We spoke a few times. It was just basic, hi, how are you? And then he goes on to talk about how, you know, when BeaPlays said, yeah, like I said, I was sorry, you know, we made amends and we played games a couple of times and then, you know, we just didn't talk anymore after that. And Logan saying, you played Overwatch with a friend and I, we didn't even use voice chat. We literally just hopped into a party. I was still trying to keep the peace at the time. So Logan saying, yeah, no, stuff is not resolved. Definitely isn't. And then he says, how can you talk about the UK situation in one sentence? I wrote paragraphs about most of the things that happened while I was over there. Why are you not talking about any of that? So I guess this has to do with when Logan visited B, and he's kind of hinting that some stuff happened during that time, which is definitely concerning. Then he talks about how when the school did their investigation, half the stuff apparently had never even happened yet, so they didn't even do a full investigation on everything that had occurred. And then he says, all this charity and supporting smaller creators will never make up for things you did to me and the others you've hurt. Obviously, I'm absolutely pissed right now. The entire statement was straight up BS. To me, you did not actually take accountability for anything. It's crazy to me that you're basically blaming your mental illness for the stuff you did to me, which is definitely the impression that I got. I felt like it was a lot of woe's me, I'm a victim, I did a bad thing, oopsies, my bad, it was an accident, I didn't mean it, I was going through a hard time, I was just lonely, right? Logan actually then goes on to say that it's been a month, this is all they have to say, you know, like, this is just, you know, like, can you not come up with something better, right? And then he finishes by saying that he actually confronted BeaPlays in 2022 and that this is basically the same thing that she said to him back then, which tells me that this, you know, BeaPlays is trying to act like the situation was wrapped up years ago, but as recent as 2022, they were still having conversations about this. So that tells me that this has very much heavily impacted Logan, which rightfully so, and it's not resolved. And it's interesting and bizarre to me to paint a picture where things are resolved when they very clearly are not, right? Almost trying to sweep it under the rug. And then he finishes by saying he could say so much more, but he's not going to share it because he recognized that people in these communities are young, and says they don't need to hear about that kind of trauma. Which, again, very alarming. Logan is hinting that more things have happened. And, you know, my intention with any of my content is always to, you know, be mindful that there are people on the other side of these screens. And I'm not just going to sit here and cancel, because cancel culture is a very toxic thing, and it takes the lives of lots of people every year, right? And I'm not trying to be a bully or to dogpile somebody who's already down, but to take a month, almost a month, right, to apparently make a statement and to work on yourself and to figure things out, and then to come up with something where is very much gaslighting to me. Like, I find it hard to believe that this got past a lawyer, because in leaked DMs with her editor, she was saying that she was going to be talking to a lawyer. Would you not have your lawyer review this? Like, I get it's very vague, which is probably something a lawyer would instruct you to do, but I find it hard to believe that a YouTuber this big doesn't have like a PR specialist or somebody to like look this over and be like, hey, that probably won't go over well. Like, it's just bizarre to me. Also, to put out a statement saying that things are resolved, but it doesn't sound like any private conversations with Logan were had, because Logan is writing this like he didn't know this was going to be coming out, that he's very upset because the stuff apparently isn't true. And so it's like, you released a statement saying sorry for what you did, but you didn't apologize directly to the victim? I don't know, this is just very confusing to me. There's a lot of stuff that has been very vaguely touched on, and it's interesting because she says the reason she doesn't mention Logan by name is because she doesn't want him getting hate. But in my opinion, I believe the reason that she's not mentioning his name is because she doesn't want people to search up Logan and to find his version of events. Because if you're trying to paint this picture that you're somewhat of a victim, that you're just lonely and you're going through a hard time and you made it oopsies, and then this other person who's your alleged victim is saying, yeah, no, that's not true, she did a ton of terrible things to me, obviously, you know, it's not going to end well for you. People are not going to like you. And I do find a personal issue with this, mainly just because I, you know, have had stuff happen to me personally that is very similar to this, actually. Not with BeaPlays, to be very clear. It did not happen with BeaPlays. But it is very alarming to me that people that are consistently in positions of power in Roblox and are popular on the Roblox platform are very frequently outed for being inappropriate with children, right? And, you know, I just think it's very unfortunate, especially since BeaPlays is a transgender creator, that people are using this opportunity to then hate on other transgender creators. Like, somebody's identity does not have to do with their choices and actions, right? This was a set of very incredibly poor choices and incredibly poor judgment and actions on BeaPlays' part. It is not a reflection of her being a transgender creator. So I want to be very clear about that, because lots of people are trying to make this into a trans thing when it certainly is not. That has nothing to do with the situation, right? But it is very sad to see that somebody who, you know, was, you know, had proudly stated that they were trans and they were encouraging maybe other trans creators to not be as scared, to start making content and to be themselves. And now it's almost turning into this thing where people are weaponizing that against her, which, like, no. Hold somebody accountable for the things they did, not who they are as a person. Thank you very much. Now, with that in mind, honestly, I'm incredibly disgusted by this. I did try to play devil's advocate in my earlier videos, just to be, fair, because we hadn't heard anything from BeaPlays, but it's alarming to me that Logan is claiming that a lot of this stuff is made to sound like it's not as bad as it was, to downplay her actions, to almost avoid, not accountability, but the degree of accountability that is warranted here. But anyways, I didn't want to make this video too long. I will definitely be looking at the comments in this video. You guys can let me know what you think about this. But this is not the space to be transphobic. It's not the space to be mean or to spread rumors, okay? Rumors are very damaging. Let's focus on the stuff that has been proven that Logan is claiming, not just random stuff from random Twitter accounts that you see, right? But yeah, this is very alarming. I'm very concerned by this, and I think this could be justification as to why her verification badge was taken away. But again, I don't know for sure. But with that in mind, let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section below, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye!